Science has a word it uses when something is gone forever: extinct. And when that word gets attached to an animal, most people assume the story is over. The book is closed. The species is done. But here's the thing, nature doesn't always read the book. There is a category of animals so remarkable, so stubbornly alive against all odds, that scientists gave them a special name: Lazarus species. Animals that disappeared from the fossil record or from human observation for so long that the scientific community declared them gone, only for them to turn up very much alive, sometimes decades, sometimes millions of years later, looking at us like we were the ones who got it wrong. And in today's video, I'm going to walk you through 7 of the most jaw-dropping examples of this phenomenon ever recorded. These are animals that were written off, put in the history books, mourned, and then found. Some of them hiding in plain sight. Some of them surviving in places so remote that we simply hadn't looked hard enough. And every single one of them completely changed the way scientists think about extinction itself. Because if these 7 species taught us anything, it's that the word extinct should always come with an asterisk. Let's get into it. If you wanted to pick the single most dramatic example of a Lazarus species in the entire history of science, it would be very hard to beat our first animal, the coelacanth. Because this fish was not missing for a decade. It was not missing for a century. Scientists believed the coelacanth had been extinct for approximately 66 million years. Let that sink in. 66 million years. That is the same extinction event that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs. And yet, somehow, this fish made it through. The coelacanth was known entirely from the fossil record. Paleontologists had studied its ancient remains extensively and concluded that it vanished at the end of the Cretaceous period, along with everything else that disappeared in that mass extinction. It was considered a fascinating relic of prehistoric life, a creature you could study in stone but never in the flesh. Case closed. Then came December 1938. A museum curator in South Africa named Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer was checking through the catch of a local fishing trawler near the mouth of the Chilumna River when she noticed something strange sitting in the hall. A large, unusual fish she didn't recognize. About 5 feet long, pale blue, with thick, fleshy fins that looked almost like stubby limbs. She had no idea what it was, but she knew it was important. She had it preserved and contacted a fish expert named J.L.B. Smith, who took one look at it and nearly fell out of his chair. It was a coelacanth, alive, caught by a fisherman who had probably been pulling them up for years without knowing what they were. The scientific world erupted. A living fossil, a fish from the age of dinosaurs swimming in the Indian Ocean in 1938. Since that discovery, a second population has been found off the coast of Sulawesi in Indonesia, thousands of miles away. And what makes the coelacanth even more extraordinary is that it hasn't changed. This fish looks almost identical to its 66-million-year-old fossils. Evolution essentially left it alone, because when something works, you don't mess with it. Our next animal is one of my absolute favorites on this list, because of the way it was found. Not by a scientist on a funded expedition, not by a research team with satellite imagery and camera traps. The Chicoan peccary was rediscovered because a scientist happened to walk through a local market in South America and stopped dead in his tracks. But let's back up. The Chicoan peccary is a stocky, pig-like mammal with a large head, thick, bristly fur, and a face that looks like it was designed by a committee. It belongs to the peccary family, which are related to pigs but are their own distinct group entirely. And for decades, scientists knew this particular species only from fossils dug out of the ground in South America. It was classified as a prehistoric animal, something that had roamed the continent thousands of years ago and then quietly disappeared as the world changed around it. A museum piece, ancient history. Then, in 1972, a zoologist named Ralph Wetzel was working in the Gran Chaco, a vast and brutally harsh lowland region stretching across Paraguay, Bolivia, and Argentina. The Gran Chaco is not an easy place to work. It is one of the most inhospitable environments in the Western Hemisphere. Extreme heat, dense thorny scrub, unpredictable flooding, and almost no infrastructure. It is exactly the kind of place where a large mammal could go undetected by Western science for a very long time. Wetzel came across skulls and remains that didn't match any known living species. He followed the trail and eventually encountered living animals that the local indigenous communities knew about and had always known about. They called it the tagua. Scientists called it a fossil. The locals just called it Tuesday. Formally described as a new living species in the mid-1970s, the Chicoan peccary was a creature that existed simultaneously in the fossil record and in the real world, and nobody outside of that remote region had connected the two. It remains one of the most extraordinary large mammal discoveries of the 20th century, and it was hiding in one of the most overlooked places on Earth. Most new species get discovered by scientists combing through remote jungles with nets and notebooks and years of grant funding behind them. Our next animal was discovered in a food market, being sold for dinner, which is either the most embarrassing or the most poetic rediscovery in the history of zoology, depending on how you look at it. The Laotian rock rat is a small, dark, squirrel-sized rodent with a long tail, short legs, and a face that looks vaguely prehistoric in a way that's hard to immediately put your finger on. And that instinct turns out to be completely correct. Because when scientists finally got their hands on a specimen, they realized they weren't looking at a new species at all. They were looking at an animal that belonged to an entire family of rodents that was previously known only from 11-million-year-old fossils. A family so ancient it had been classified as long extinct, gone before humans ever walked the earth. Here is how it happened. In 2005, a Wildlife Conservation Society researcher named Robert Timmons was passing through a market in Thakak, Laos, and spotted an unusual rodent among the animals being sold as bushmeat. He didn't recognize it. He acquired a specimen, got it back to the lab, and the analysis that followed caused a quiet earthquake in the world of mammalogy. The formal scientific description came the following year. The animal was identified as a member of Diatomyidae, a rodent family with no known living representatives, a family that scientists had studied exclusively through compressed ancient rock. And here it was, fresh from a Laotian market stall, looking completely unbothered by the 11 million years of extinction science had assigned to it. What makes this story even more extraordinary is that local people in the limestone karst regions of central Laos were completely familiar with the animal. They had their own name for it. They ate it regularly. To them, it was just part of the local wildlife. The scientific world had declared its entire family tree extinct while the locals were cooking it for lunch. Nature has a sense of humor, and it is absolutely ruthless. The name alone should tell you everything you need to know about why this animal matters. The terror skink. That is its actual common name, and it earned it. This is not a tiny, delicate little lizard you'd find sunning itself on a garden wall. The terror skink is a large, powerful, predatory lizard with strongly curved teeth, designed specifically for grabbing and holding on to prey. It looks like something a concept artist designed for a science fiction film and then accidentally left loose in the Pacific. For over a century, scientists knew the terror skink from exactly one source: a single museum specimen collected in 1872 from the island of New Caledonia in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. One specimen. No live sightings, no additional remains, no local accounts that researchers had been able to verify. Just this one preserved lizard sitting in a museum collection, representing an entire species. And as the decades passed with no further evidence of the animal existing anywhere in the world, the scientific consensus quietly shifted toward the obvious conclusion. The terror skink was extinct. One specimen, one island, one sad ending. Then, in 2003, a team of researchers conducting a survey on Île des Pins, a small island off the southern tip of New Caledonia, found one, alive. Moving through the leaf litter at night, doing exactly what terror skinks apparently do, which is hunt and survive and refuse to cooperate with the scientific community's decision that they no longer exist. The rediscovered population was small. The terror skink remains one of the rarest lizards on the planet and is currently listed as critically endangered. Its survival is precarious, and the threats it faces from invasive species and habitat disturbance are very real, but it is alive. A lizard with hooked predatory teeth that spent 131 years as nothing more than a museum curiosity turned out to be very much present on a small Pacific island, waiting patiently for someone to come and look properly. Extinct for 131 years, found on a night survey, the terror skink refused to go quietly. Before I show you the last part, if you want to look at your own results and see where these Lazarus species fit into your understanding of the natural world and your own bloodline, I put a full 3-volume PDF bundle. Over at the Origin DNA website, it shows you how to read your raw data and find matches beyond what Ancestry or 23andMe tell you. Link is in the description. But stay right here, because what comes next is the part most people completely miss. This next story has everything. A species declared completely extinct, a ranch dog, a dark Wyoming night, and one of the most unlikely conservation comebacks in American wildlife history. Because the black-footed ferret was not rediscovered by a team of biologists with sophisticated equipment and a targeted search plan, it was rediscovered because a farm dog named Shep dragged a dead one onto a ranch porch in 1981 and dropped it at his owner's feet like a gift. The black-footed ferret is North America's only native ferret species. Sleek, fast, and masked like a tiny bandit, it is one of the most charismatic predators on the continent. It lives almost entirely on prairie dogs, hunting them inside their own burrow systems in a display of predatory efficiency that is genuinely remarkable to watch. But by the middle of the 20th century, large-scale prairie dog eradication programs across the American West had obliterated the ferret's entire food base, and with it, the ferret itself. By 1979, after exhaustive searches turned up nothing, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service made it official. The black-footed ferret was extinct. 2 years later, Shep, the ranch dog, disagreed. The dead ferret he produced led biologists to a small wild population surviving near Meeteetse, Wyoming on the hog ranch. Roughly 130 individuals were discovered clinging on in that area, which was extraordinary news. And then immediately got worse. Canine distemper and sylvatic plague tore through the population, and by 1986, only 18 animals remained alive in the entire world. The decision was made to capture every single one of them and begin an emergency captive breeding program. From those 18 animals, biologists built a population. It took years of painstaking work, careful genetic management, and a breeding program that at times felt more like a desperate gamble than a scientific plan. But it worked. Today, more than 300 black-footed ferrets live in the wild across multiple reintroduction sites in the American West, from 18 individuals to a recovering wild population. From extinct to merely endangered, one ranch dog changed everything. 3 centuries is a long time to be missing. Most species don't get a second chance after 3 decades of absence. After 300 years, the idea of rediscovery stops feeling like science and starts feeling like mythology. But the Bermuda petrel, locally known as the cow, named for the eerie ghostly call it makes in the darkness, pulled off exactly that. It vanished for more than 300 years and then came back. And the story of how it survived is almost as extraordinary as the fact that it did. The cow was once abundant across Bermuda. Early settlers described enormous colonies nesting across the islands, filling the night air with that haunting wailing call that gave the bird its name. But those same settlers proceeded to do what settlers so often did. They introduced rats and pigs to the island, hunted the birds heavily for food, and within about a decade of European arrival had reduced the cow population to almost nothing. By the early 1620s, colonial authorities were already passing laws attempting to protect the surviving birds. It wasn't enough. By around 1620, the cow was declared extinct. More than 3 centuries of silence followed. Then, in 1951, a naturalist named Robert Cushman Murphy and a teenage Bermudian named David Wingate were exploring a cluster of tiny rocky islets off the coast of Bermuda when they found active cow nesting burrows. 18 nesting pairs. That was it. 18 pairs representing the entire surviving global population of a bird that the world had written off 3 centuries earlier. What followed was one of the longest and most dedicated single-species conservation efforts ever undertaken. David Wingate spent the next 50 years of his life protecting those birds. He removed invasive species from the nesting islets, built artificial burrows, managed every aspect of the colony's survival with a devotion that went so far beyond professional obligation that it became something closer to a life's purpose. Today, the cow population has grown to well over 100 nesting pairs. A bird missing for more than 300 years is now actively rebuilding. Some stories take centuries to finish. Our final animal on this list is proof that nature will find a way to survive in the most improbable, dramatic, and frankly inconvenient places it can possibly choose. Because the Lord Howe Island stick insect did not survive in a lush, protected forest. It did not survive in a remote jungle, or a hidden cave system, or an unexplored river basin. It survived on a volcanic sea cliff, a sheer rock pillar rising out of the Tasman Sea, approximately 20 kilometers from the island it originally called home, with almost no vegetation, battered by wind and spray, and visited by humans approximately never. If you were designing a hiding spot for a species that didn't want to be found, you could not do much better than Ball's Pyramid. The Lord Howe Island stick insect is not small. This is a large, heavy, glossy black insect, sometimes called the land lobster, which should give you a sense of the scale we are talking about. It was once common on Lord Howe Island in the Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand. Then, in 1918, a supply ship ran aground near the island, and rats got ashore. Within 2 years, the stick insect had disappeared from Lord Howe Island entirely. By 1930, it was declared extinct. The rats had been that efficient and that devastating. For 70 years, that was the end of the story. Then, in 2001, a small team of Australian researchers decided to climb Ball's Pyramid on a hunch based on old reports of large stick insects being seen there by rock climbers. What they found, clinging to a single melaleuca bush 12 meters above the ocean on that vertical cliff face, was a population of 24 Lord Howe Island stick insects, 24 individuals, the last of their kind, surviving on one small bush on a sea cliff, doing absolutely nothing wrong and asking for nothing from anyone. Since that discovery, a captive breeding program at Melbourne Zoo has grown the population to thousands of individuals. Reintroduction to Lord Howe Island is now actively planned following ongoing rat eradication efforts. 24 animals on a cliff edge turned out to be enough. It is almost always enough if we choose to look. 7 animals. 7 times the word extinct turned out to be premature. And what I find so remarkable about every single one of these stories is not just that these creatures survived, it's where they survived. In a food market, on a sea cliff, on a ranch in Wyoming, in a limestone karst that nobody thought to check. Nature does not file paperwork when it decides to keep something alive. It just keeps it alive and waits for us to catch up. The lesson here is not that extinction doesn't matter. It absolutely does. Species are being lost right now at a rate that should genuinely frighten every single person watching this. But the lesson is that we should be very careful about the finality we assign to the word gone. Because sometimes gone just means not yet found. And sometimes all it takes is one researcher, one survey, one ranch dog with something in his mouth to rewrite everything we thought we knew. These Lazarus species didn't survive because they were lucky. They survived because they found a way, in the margins and the cliff sides and the deep water and the forgotten corners of the world, to keep going. And every single time we find one, it is not just a scientific discovery. It is a reminder that this planet is bigger and stranger and more resilient than we give it credit for. Never stop looking. The story is never really over. Most people look at their DNA percentages and stop there, missing the real story. Over at the Origin DNA, I built a 3-volume PDF guide bundle to fix that. It shows you exactly how to analyze your raw data, break down matches, and trace your deepest ancestral roots. The link is right at the top of the description. Click it, grab your copy, and I'll see you in the next video.